Here we are. Welcome back. It's been a while. Originally when I started doing these podcasts, the idea was all spawned around, having a quiet mind, time to think, and exploring people's narratives. That was the key. What kind of spawned this change was incorporating what I have been doing, which is getting together, having good, authentic conversations, but also incorporating some of the things that do drive me crazy. And trip reviews, they're always the same. It's me sitting in front of a computer and trying to put some pictures together. So maybe incorporating the two will free up some more time. Here we go. Westbank Anglers Permit to Think. It's a little different. All right, well, welcome back. Our guest today, our Greg Case. Thanks for coming, Greg.
Happy to be here, Mike.
And Colin. Thanks for coming, Colin.
Yeah, happy to be here as well.
Yeah, well, before we get going, we do have to address the Eagles real quick because Greg is an Eagles fan, and we won't spend too much time on it. But Monday night was so painful. I just faded, and
Brutal.
I will say, watching my son get angry was fulfilling, which maybe that's part of an Eagles thing. But how'd you take it?
Well, I mean, Mike, because you grew up in the Philadelphia area, as did I. It's the Eagles are agony and ecstasy always. It's very rare that it's all up into the right with the Eagles. There's a lot of moments in any season where you wind up shouting at the television or throwing something at it. Monday night was definitely that. And it's terrible to see a team with all that talent just consistently play like crap. But that seems to be the theme of this year. I was at the Bears game the week before when they were even worse. So it's
just kind of ruined a great weekend.
On
deck. Yeah, we were talking about it last night. A couple of us were watching Thursday Night Football, and we've come a long way from the Super Bowl, which best game I've ever seen in my life. But also having the rest of the country rooting for us. Those are special times. So
for sure,
I'm hanging on to that.
And quite honestly, Mike, as a lot of people around the country think we're insane because at 8-5, we still control our destiny. We all want to bench our starting quarterback who's the Super Bowl MVP 10 months ago. So, Philadelphia fans have some serious mental health problems. So I'm damning myself with that comment, but it's true.
Absolutely. Well, on to just some quick background, Greg, on to, how did you get into fishing? How did the journey start for you?
Sure. I started probably when I was 2 or 3 years old with my father up in Maine. We'd go up there every summer for vacation. And so I think for the first 30 years of my life, I was a worm dunker for brook trout in little streams up in Maine. And that's where I did the bulk of my fishing. I got into fly fishing when I was coming out of business school. A buddy of mine introduced me to it. And, I loved it. I had my first trip ever was to the Bitterroot River for the Squaw Hatch in the spring, which is a very storied hatch, and fell in love with it. As we all know, you wind up doing it in beautiful places, and that river at that time was actually pretty lightly fished for that Squaw Hatch. So you spend a whole day and see not another boat on the water and catch 40 or 50 fish, most of them, quite large, up and eating dry flies in early April, which I think is pretty rare almost anywhere. But that's really what got me hooked on fly fishing. And then one of my guide buddies from Montana, who I think was number 115 in the Montana guide system, which means he was one of the originals, started talking to me about saltwater fly fishing, probably in the early 2000s. And I told him I wasn't that interested because I loved fishing for trout, and how could it be any better? And then I went down and did a trip actually in the Yucatan, and I've been heavy saltwater guy ever since. And if I had one more day to fish, I'd probably do it in the salt. So I've sort of come around. It's all good, but the saltwater fishing for me is pretty awesome.
I've never hit the actual Squaw Hatch right up that way. Are there snow-capped mountains in the background when that's going on?
Yeah, the Bitterroot, we tend to fish it mid-river. So from Darby, if you're familiar with that part of the country,
Yeah.
which happens to be where they actually filmed the Yellowstone series. That's sort of put that town on the map. But from Darby downriver, probably all the way down to Stevensville and below that, so a pretty good chunk of water. And Bitterroot has large browns, very large cuts and cut bows. It's been a catch and release for cutthroat for about 25 years now. And actually, the guides that have been there much longer than me would tell you the fishing now is better than it's ever been. But the
Oh, that's great.
pressure is also higher than it's ever been. But
Yeah,
it's
something you don't hear too often, though.
what's that?
That's something you don't hear too often. Is it's better than it's ever been.
Yeah, it's the question always is there a tipping point with the amount of pressure that we have? But the river has held up pretty well, and I've been doing it there now for over 30 years. But it flows right at the base of the Bitterroot Mountains, right near where Lewis and Clark went through, back on their expedition. And the Bitterroot flows through a large valley with probably 2,000 feet of gravel in that valley, from what I've been told. So the river changes course every year, and it's filled with cut banks and root balls and sod and great fish habitat. It's got more timber in that river than I've seen in any river I've ever fished. And that is really what helps make it a great river.
Yeah, and so there during that hatch when it's going. I mean, it has to be. I know exactly where you're talking about. I've fished it. There's got to be snow-peaked mountain. I guess where I'm getting at is right is the big dry thing with snow mountains. Right. Snow on the mountains in the background is it's pretty magical. I mean,
it's just spectacular. And you're right. We're there pre-snow melt, which is the whole play. The water's cold. I mean, the temperature's typically upper 30s to mid 40s, but believe it or not, it fishes really well at that temperature. And the snow is usually by that point in time, most years above 5,000 feet. And the river from Darby down drops from maybe 4,400 feet to 4,000 feet. So we're usually about 1,000 feet below snowmelt. But I've been out there plenty of times during blizzards in early April, and I've been out there when it's 80 degrees. It's sort of considered to be the banana belt of Montana, and it's got a pretty wide range of temperatures you can get. But there's always snow on the mountains, just a matter of how close it is to the river.
Yeah, sure. Fishing. And you grew up in the Philly area, or no?
I grew up in Bucks County. Yeah. And I seem to recall you grew up around Westchester. Is that right?
Yes. Well, my whole father's side of the family was Chester Springs, and then I grew up in Pennington, New Jersey. Okay. Would bounce back and forth. So
yeah, I've got cousins in Pennington, but yeah, that's so Yardley, Pennsylvania, specifically, which is right in the Delaware. Not too far from Pennington.
Excellent. And Colin, I get to see you almost on a daily basis, but why don't you tell everyone where you're from and how'd the fishing find you?
Yeah, I'm originally from Virginia. Grew up in a small town called Clarksville in Southern Virginia on a lake there. So growing up on a lake, naturally, picked up a spin rod first and would fish pretty much daily for largemouth, catfish, gar, crappie, as we call them in Virginia, but most people call them crappie. And then, pivoted to fly fishing in college. I had a bunch of buddies that fly fished. I was always kind of interested in it, and would see them going out, and started going out with them, and it was kind of a game over from there, I'd say, or the start of the game rather. But started fly fishing and didn't look back, and that's really what brought me out west to Wyoming.
Did you catch a lot of gar growing up?
Yeah, super fun fish to catch. They roll and sip a lot like tarpon. They have a lung, and so we'd go out on stand-up paddleboards, and you'd see them kind of popping around everywhere. And we'd tie these like rope lures, no hooks, just unravel the rope and put wire around it, and did that, and it's a blast.
Yeah.
Actually, a very good eating fish too.
Yeah. Yeah, and we'll get to your guys' experience at the Blacksmith Lodge, but before we do, I'd be remiss if we didn't touch on the Jackson Hole One Fly, which obviously both of you participate in, and Greg is the chairman of the board. That's correct, right, Greg?
It is. Yeah, I've been chairman of the board for about 5 years now.
That's great. And what was your introduction, or both of you?
To the event itself, I have one of my good friends here in Philadelphia, his father had been participating. Actually, I think participated ever since the first one fly. And so that's how we heard about it. Al Shoemaker, I don't know if you ever met Al, Mike, but he fished with Joe DeBryan. Joe had been the chairman of the event for quite a while. A team from LA called LA Rods. It's been pretty successful there for a long time. But anyhow, we heard about it through my friend's father. I think we applied for 7 straight years, did not get the nod, and finally got in. I think 2006 or 2007 was our first year. And we've done it ever since. And I think I went on the board around 2015 and became chairman in 2020. And then as chairman, my first act was to cancel the one fly because of COVID. So, but what we try to do, we've been, and you told me when you want me to stop talking about the one fly, but our whole goal is to raise money to help protect the snake in the South Fork, to put it back into the community on the Jackson and on the Idaho side. And so when that year when we canceled the one fly, we still paid all the guides and the outfitters full freight as if we held the tournament, just because we knew people were probably in a bit of a pinch, given that a lot of folks were having trips canceled. And I think that that's sort of indicative of what we've tried to be, which is a really good partner for the community, outfitters, guides, and just the folks that live out on either side of the Tetons out there.
Yeah, and Colin, your foray was as a guide, right?
Yeah. I mean, ever since I moved here, I had heard about the one fly, whether it's good or bad, I always heard about it, and it always seemed intriguing, and never really, I don't know, just was guiding and never really thought about guiding in it. And then I was asked to, and I was like, yeah, sure, let's try it out. And I got to say, I had an absolute blast guiding it. Got to meet some great people, had some really fun days on the water, and then was fortunate enough to be invited by Lisa Smith, who's also a board member, to join her team, and have fished it for, I think, 3 years now. And, to this day, I think I still regret not taking your advice. And when I won top pro on the first year I did it, I should have just quit and ended on top. And now I'm ever chasing that, that high again of trying to win it. But it's fun. It's a really fun event. And I think people forget that. And it's a lot of fun. It's the most fishing I get to do, I feel like, all summer. It's, 2 full days of where I'm not rowing the boat at all. I'm just kind of casting the rod, and it's fun. I mean, fishing and all these other activities we do, it takes your mind off a lot of things. And I'd say the one fly does it 10x because you're focused on that one little fly all day long. And that's the only thing you give a damn about the whole time.
No, it's
I mean, I've been, sorry, Greg, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's well said. I tend to fish small dries when I'm out there, not always, but 80% of the time. And as you get older, you'll make a cast, you can't see your fly in the water anymore, so you're constantly freaked out that you've lost it. But it's a lot of fun, but it's incredibly intense. And I actually think in a lot of ways it's very similar to fishing for tarpon or permit. And what I mean by that is you've got stretches where not a lot goes on, and then all of a sudden a very important thing happens in a short period of time, and you have to react well or you miss your opportunity. And so it's a pretty intense fishing experience, as it typically is if you're fishing for either one of those species in salt.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've been in and around it now for probably 25 years, either as the outfitter, providing guides, donating, participating, all of it. And I think what's interesting to me is, and I'm addressing this quite often now when the Jackson Hole one fly comes up, is it's almost like the intensity of the event, because there's no doubt, right? I've been in that, and it's almost all consuming.
Yeah.
Kind of takes over, if you live here, for the buzz of what's actually happening. What's actually happening is remarkable, right? I mean, the amount of dollars raised and the ability for nonprofits to apply, for a grant through the foundation, the amount of money, right, is remarkable. I mean, I don't have my number on.
Yeah, no, I can
probably have the
I
number.
can give that to you. Yeah, no, I can give it to you. I think we've, as you know, and Colin knows, on the Friday night before the event, we have an auction, and that's the principal fundraising mechanism. People can donate year round, but that's the bulk of the money comes in during that one night. And we've been very successful. John Holland, who works on the board with me, runs that auction, has done an incredible job. And we're now raising on average $400,000 to $500,000 in that one night. So in the past 40 years, this will be our 40th year coming up. We started out smaller, and now we're at a full field of 40 teams, 160 anglers. But we've donated $3.4 million from money that we've raised directly, but that has then triggered about $25 million of money from other sources. So all told, we're approaching $30 million that's been raised and deployed in lots of projects, conservation, education, community-based on both sides of the Tetons. And I think, we're well over probably 100 projects at this point, probably quite a bit over 100. And the way that tends to break down is the vast majority are conservation related. Example is work we've done on Rainy Creek to help with the fish passage there. Flat Creek restoration work for those folks that are maybe watching or listening that have fished Flat Creek on the Jackson side. We sponsor Kids Days on both the Jackson and the Idaho side to get the next generation of fly fishermen up and involved, hopefully. We have scholarships. I think we did 9 last year, 9 scholarships we paid for the Spencer Morton Scholarship, which is affiliated with the Jackson Hole Fly Fishing School. And we have a University of Wyoming Aquatic Biology Scholarship that we have in place. So we do a lot of work with science. We try to get the younger folks involved, spend a ton of money and time on conservation projects, also providing access on both the South Fork and the Snake itself. So I'm not sure. It's funny, Mike. Even though a lot of people that are in the event have been doing it for years, you'd be surprised. I don't think the work that we've done is as well known. And footprints is well understood as the dollar amount should be, because the dollar is consumable.
And that's been my kind of recent takeaway, because it is consuming, right? Whether or not someone's for the event or someone's anti, I don't know why, but they would be. But then it comes up in my conversation right away, where it's like, you know where this is all going, right? You know it's for. I mean, it's those numbers you just said, those are pretty remarkable, right? And and I'm curious as to how, here we go, right? This is a good example of getting it out there, right? I mean, because it is really remarkable. And as someone who's a board member on the South Fork Initiative, I appreciate the work on Rainy Creek, right? I mean, that's all pretty amazing stuff.
Well, and as you may not know yet, but you probably will hear about it at some point, we actually, it was very kind. The Henry's Fork Foundation came over and presented to our board in July, because I know, a lot of the work that's been done over there is very interesting. It's been done over a long period of time, longitudinal studies on temperature and turbidity in water, all of which is important. And they came over and updated us on what they were doing, because I think there's an opportunity to do more with the Henry's Fork Foundation to benefit the South Fork, for example.
Absolutely.
So, we're all in this together. I think that sometimes you can lose sight of that. And to your earlier comment, the weekend of the One Fly is such an intense weekend. It's very difficult to get your head up. And so we need to do more to sort of talk about at other times of the year exactly what the One Fly is all about. But thank goodness for us, we've got folks like the Henry's Fork Foundation, the South Fork Initiative, Trout Unlimited. The Jackson Hole chapter has done a ton. We've done a lot of projects with them. So there are a lot of folks that all are working towards the same end goal, which is hopefully to leave this fishery as good or better as it is now for the next generation. That's really the goal.
Yeah, no, it's remarkable. And I mean, I remember when we were trying to start the South Fork Initiative a while ago, it was a bunch of fishing bums, right? And it was like, finally the revelation was like, we have no idea what we're doing, but the Henry's Fork Foundation does. So we are an initiative of HFF. Well, yeah, that's remarkable. And I couldn't agree more with what you said, right? I mean, it's such an intense event that what the higher goal should be celebrated more other times of the year, right? I mean, it truly is remarkable.
We've updated our website, which is going to allow us now to do more of that. Our website was an older version, and we've got a new one that's out now, and we can really do a lot more with that to provide more regular content so folks can go on that website and really get a better feel for what we do. Every project that we worked on is now featured on that website. It's an interactive map. You can click on a dot and pull up the information on the project itself. And so the goal really is to make more and more people aware of these projects, because we like to ultimately get to the point where people donate directly for a specific project. That actually allows us to expand our donation footprint. And there's more than enough, as you well know, work to go around conservation, restoration, education. So the new website, I think, will be very helpful for us.
Yeah, well, as I'm staring at green grass growing on the south side of my my house currently in December, which is very confusing.
Yeah.
But there'll be plenty of projects, right? I mean,
yeah.
Well, great. Well, thanks for that. Yeah, let's move on to Blacksmith. Near and dear spot to my heart. The whole area, not obviously just Blacksmith, but the whole thing, and spent a lot of time down there. But I wasn't on your trip, so let's hear a little bit. Right, first time I know for Colin, but for you too, Greg.
It was. Yeah, it was. It was great having Colin there. He did a great job of hosting us, and we were very fortunate. I came with 3 friends, and I think we had a total of, remind me, Colin, were there 8 fishermen on the trip in total?
9 total.
9. Yeah. And it was wonderful because we got along famously, and I think we all said as we were leaving, we look forward to seeing everybody that was there again next November, because we were there in early November. So the folks we fished with were terrific. Just a really fun bunch of guys. Colin did a great job of keeping us organized, and when we had the occasional equipment glitch was helpful. I mean, my Mako reel blew up in my hotel room actually before we even started. So Colin,
that was a tough one.
Yeah, it was a toughie, but that was great. And I have to say, I've been to Ascension Bay, I think 6 or 7 times over the years, and I loved it. And we stayed in Punta Allen, nice little town. I mean, it seems like a booming metropolis next to Punta Herrero, but the thing about Ascension Bay that you just have to get used to is there's a lot of boat traffic, whether it's eco tours or other lodges, and you get down to ESB and it's a beautiful, beautiful body of water. And, taking that 2-hour drive or hour and a half drive from the airport, little strip that you fly into, up to the lodge, you get a sense it's really quite remote. And then you go out on that water and you see very few other boats other than the boats that are with the lodge itself. The fishery, I think, reflects that. It's just a beautiful place. And one of the very few times in my life where where reality exceeded expectations by a pretty wide margin. And that was despite the fact that we had probably half the trip, we had some challenging weather. But it's just such a phenomenal fishery, unbelievable food at the lodge, terrific guides, couldn't have been better.
Yeah, and speaking of boats, right? Like it's interesting once you get a little more familiar with the place. Like I'll forever go to Punta Allen, right? Like in fact, I love it, and the same would go with the Keys, right? Like you're just kind of used to the boat traffic, because you're going to the Keys. But you were just down there, right, with Willie Benson?
I was with Will. I've had the good fortune to fish with Will and another well-known guy down there, Aaron Snell, both whom participate in the permit tournaments. I think, Mike, that you've participated in one a few times, I think, with Will. But, it's funny. The Keys has fished better and better. I've only been going down there for 3 years, but the last 4 trips I've had have been phenomenal. Tarpon, bonefish, and permit. A lot of bonefish. Permit are coming back. I just came back from there a week ago. We were taking shots at 100 to 150 pound tarpon all day long, which I think is kind of unusual for December, but they've had very settled weather. But I've come to realize how great that fishery is, and yet you're not going to get your reps. I mean, you can get your reps at tarpon, you can get your reps at bonefish.
Yeah.
It's hard to get your reps on permit, particularly if you're a beginning permit fisherman in the Keys, because you just don't get that many shots. And I contrast that with ESB, and Colin will confirm this, hopefully. I think in the first 3 days of ESB, we must have seen, just me and my boat mate, we must have seen a couple thousand permit in huge schools.
Yeah, I would agree.
It's right, Colin?
Yeah, I'd say it's not something that always happens, but it did happen. It's I mean, you could definitely see the numbers. But that was extraordinary. It was.
Yeah, I mean, that was, and right, you wouldn't expect to see that all the time. And we, of course, Mother Nature conspired to screw us in the last 3 days of the trip with bad weather. But I mean, the Keys are wonderful, and if you get to fish with a guy like Will Benson or Aaron Snell, they're phenomenal teachers. So it's great, but it has a different vibe. The water's beautiful, but you won't see quite as many permit for sure. And, the tarpon are there and the bonefish there. So there are other reasons to be down there. But, you get to ESB and you get to see a fishery, at least in my experience, I think is much closer to what it might have been 10, 15, 20 years ago. And as we started out the conversation, very few places are anywhere near as good as they were 10 or 15 or 20 years ago. I'm assuming ESB is probably pretty close just because the pressure hasn't been as high. But you, Mike, you would know more about that than me.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think every year is a little different, and that's something, maybe should be factored into these conversations more often. But yeah, I've noticed some changes, but I would say the number of fish, if I had to generalize, right, I would say that I think it might have gone up, which is wild. And there's a lot of, and that's the cool thing, right? There's a lot of unknowns there. I mean, at least in the Keys, you've got some sort of science going on.
Right.
I mean, I have my own theories as to in that bay when the fish spawn, and I think it's literally monthly through a certain portion of the year, but no one knows, which is wild. I mean, and maybe someday we will, but it could be a while. But how about the plane ride in? That's a little
it's
out of the
it is when you make that sharp turn. You hope the runway is going to come up to meet you. But I have to say, for an East Coaster, it doesn't get much easier. There's a direct flight from Philadelphia to Cancun. I think we were in the airport 15 minutes before we were met by the driver who took us to the hotel, which is a great hotel. And you're up early the next morning, 10, 15-minute drive to the FBO, and then an hour and a half flight. And it's great because you get to see the jungle, you see the coastline, you fly over Ascension Bay, you see, the different spots that, you fished and I fished in Ascension Bay, you get to fly over those. And then to your point, all of a sudden the guy makes a hard bank turn and there's the runway. But that's all part of the experience. And,
it was pretty funny being in the back of the plane. Because as we're dropping down, you see everyone peek out. Like, where's the runway? Where's the runway? Right. Really dropping into the jungle.
Yeah. I mean, flying in from the north is equally as terrifying, but at least you could see where you're going. I mean, the first time I landed there a couple of years ago, I was like, I could obviously tell they was getting ready to land, but I was like, where the fuck are we landing?
Right,
and then all of a sudden, here comes the runway. But it's pretty comforting that they've been doing that right for a long time. Those flights.
It's funny, you get older. I'm 63. I just turned 63, and the pilots get younger. It's like now I look across. I'm watching a football game, and every coach is younger than I am, which is a little bit of a problem. But our pilot was great. I mean, he had a lot of experience, but he looked at me like he was 18 years old. So I know he's like 35 because we asked.
Pablo.
but
real Pablo.
Yeah.
The kind of like the gym outfit makes me a little uncomfortable. He's not dressed like a pilot, right?
No, he's not. But you talk to him, you realize how competent the guy is. He's very competent, and the flight was it was actually a lot of fun flying at that altitude. You get to see a lot of things you'd otherwise miss, and for me, that's sort of part of the fun of the trip. It's an experience in and of itself.
And it's cool because you get to see both Ascension and Espiritu. You fly right over both and get to see it. It's cool.
Yeah, you really get the sense of his skill set when you're coming back into Cancun.
Yeah.
And he does, I don't know what that turn is called in the aviation world, but whatever it is, it's a pretty sharp move, when he drops it out of the sky and just kind of floats in, and you're like, all right, he's pretty well dialed.
He knows what he's doing, but you're right. I expected a different approach in the Cancun airport. It's the same approach, just a bigger airport. But,
I think once again we're all kind of looking around, like, where's he going? Like the runway, we're already 3/4 to the runway, and it's below us.
Exactly. Mike, I want to come back to something you said about, because having just come from that time in the Keys with Will Benson, as I think you know, Will's now doing a lot of work for Bonefish Tarpon Trust.
Yeah.
And one of the projects I'm involved with there is a food web study for the permit, because the permit fishing really dropped off in the last probably 4 or 5 years in the Keys. They put a closure on Western Rocks during what they think was a standard spawning period there, which they think is more, I guess, like February to May or something on a full moon. And I think they're now starting to see, hopefully, the benefits of that. But it's pretty clear that the food, the food availability in the Keys is probably not what it once was. Bonefish are coming back, but the permit are sort of lagging a little bit, although, again, they're better than they were a couple years ago. But that makes me think about how intact that food chain must be in ESB and Ascension Bay as well. And I know both places have co-ops, lobster fishermen. I think you've got people out there that are mindful of the resource, probably, help take care of it in a sense. And it just strikes me that the food availability in Espiritu Santo Bay is probably still really high, maybe compared with a place like the Keys.
Yeah, and it's also I think about it quite often because I got to witness that bay before the sargassum grass, or sargasso, however people want to refer to it. It's funny that a stinky grass that can ruin your jewelry and take down communication lines,
right?
That in our tiny little sesame seed on the bagel world of permit fishing, right? That we are beneficiaries, could be, I'm not sure, of that grass, because there's no doubt some of I think that I haven't heard it, we'll hear it in a second from you guys, but some of these congregations of fish are eating what could be glass shrimp. I've taken it out and shaken that grass, and like the crabs and those, some of the tiny shrimp that end up in the back of the bay. I mean, who knows if that's, and there's no doubt they're following that grass around. Like that's, eyes on that. That's confirmed. But, is that providing, then are the crabs and the shrimp that are riding the grass waves mats in, right? I mean, there's a lot of it. Times of the year that I've flown down there in the past 4 years and just seen acres and lines, where you lose it at the horizon of that grass. I mean, are the shrimp and the crabs that are riding in on that, are they all of a sudden now starting to reproduce in the bay?
Right. It's a great question. I mean, I know before we went down, I pulled up a couple of videos of dry fly fishing, if you want to call it that, surface fishing with crab patterns for permit, which I thought that was a joke. Yeah. And then I pulled these videos, I watched it, and we didn't get a lot of that when we were down there because the weather wasn't necessarily conducive, and there wasn't a lot of sargasso in the bay when we were there. At least I didn't see it. Colin may have, but we didn't see much.
Yeah, not
but
much.
There were still, but right, Colin, there were times when, if you got in the right situation, they'd come after that topwater crab, which is pretty astonishing. And I think it has to be directly linked to sargasso, and those crabs are in those mats, and they just get used to looking for them.
Yeah, I think it's learned behavior, and it's a lot like, still fishing big foam flies for trout well after a hatch, whether it's a stonefly hatch or late season, like, fishing foam in October when the hoppers are maybe not flying around. I think it's kind of like that, where they remember it and have seen it and are hungry, and I think it's definitely added to the behavior of the fish.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you guys had I got to see very little of it, but you guys had some very slicked out weather, right? I mean, from what I saw, there were some days that were glass.
First day we got there, we started off pretty glassy when we got on the water, and that, I mean, that's another benefit, I guess, of what makes this place special is you get, like the bonus day on arrival, and it's a quick turnaround, and everyone shuffles and scrambles and grab your gear, get in the boats and go, and we get out there and it was slick calm and could see fish kind of everywhere. And that afternoon, luckily, it kind of a little wind picked up. It was actually perfect that first day. How it usually goes on your first or last day when you're not quite ready or you're leaving, where it was absolutely perfect conditions. And then the second day was about as glassy as I've ever seen it for a sustained period. I mean, it was almost all day long of absolute glass.
Which comes with its own complications, right? It's tougher to get close to those fish and everything else. But but Colin's right. We did have sort of ideal conditions, and I swear, every permit trip I've ever done, the best day is the first day,
Yeah.
and when you're not ready. And I think the permit, it has to be the fishing gods, but it's like it always. I think I'm like 12 for 12 on permit trips, where the best day is the first day, and the best up might be your first up. Now we did see permit, over the course of the week, not just that first day, but because of the weather conditions, it got tougher and tougher. But it was really, I'll put it to you this way: if the entire week was like the first day, you would not have been able to get my group of 4 out of there. You would have had to,
Yeah.
we would have been bivouacking on the beach. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Did anybody go tarpon fishing in those conditions?
Tyler did. He was a big fan of the tarpon, the snook, and that was his first, like, I guess, permit kind of, I guess, if you call it grand slam trip, like tarpon, permit, bones. And he went into it with a great attitude. We went into it thinking like, I'm just gonna go have fun. He caught his first permit on day 1, and then was kind of like, let's go do other stuff. And he was a solo boat, so had the flexibility to do that. And he would come back and be like, how'd you guys do? And like, oh, we didn't catch anything, saw some fish,
Right.
almost fed some fish. And he was like, how'd you do? And he was like, oh, I caught so many tarpon, had a blast.
Yep.
And he also took advantage, I think, of the snook.
Yeah,
the snook fishing can be quite good, and I think he caught a number of snook. And I mean, it's one of the rare places. The only other place I've ever been where you can actually do that is Ascension Bay, where you've got a shot at pretty good snook and obviously tarpon, permit, and bonefish. I think November down there, the snook fishing, from what I've observed in past trips and what I've heard from people, can be really good. And I think Tyler took, to your point, Colin, he really took advantage of that. And he seems to have avoided getting permatitis or whatever the term is. I mean, I think my guess is he just wants to catch fish and have fun. He caught a permit along the way, which is great. But I think he's avoided the plague so far.
Yeah, well, good on him, right? That's usually doesn't go that way.
Right.
Yeah.
I did see a couple videos which were very interesting. Before I talk about those, actually, what the amazing thing to me is, when it gets that slick, it's just so rare and so nice out that you think that the fishing should equate to that.
Right.
But really, the fishing is the equivalent in those scenarios of, 25-mile-an-hour winds.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just as hard to deliver what you're trying to do.
Right.
Put the fly where you want it without the fish knowing that you're there.
Right.
And so you can interact with them. And so, I mean, I'm presuming that was some of the experience in that slicked out weather.
It was. And I mean, Colin I wasn't in his boat, but I was nearby. Colin, I think, caught a permit on the second day, which was still slicked out. We had these huge schools. And Colin, it's your story, but it was like 100-foot cast of the going away fish, because otherwise they wouldn't touch it. But you should tell it, because you lived through that.
Yeah, it was a funny one. I mean, we had endured a couple hours of what I would consider fishing or permit torture. As fun as it is to see those fish floating and eating and moving all over and pushing, like we're talking about, it's super hard, and it's hard to get close to them with the boat. It's hard to cast to them. It's hard to not spook them, for that matter. And then it's especially hard to feed them. And after a bit, it was like, definitely started to lose hope. I'm not gonna lie, and I almost was like, hey, like, Aaron, let's go somewhere else. Like, these fish want absolutely nothing to do with us, and thought about it multiple times. But the important thing is we were getting reps in, and especially Spain, who I was in the boat with that day. He had never been on a permit trip and had saltwater fished a little bit, but he was getting so many reps, and I was like, this is so special, because you don't get to cast that much at fish, and he was doing a great job at putting the fly where it needed to be, and permit were being permit. And he got frustrated and stopped me. He was like, get off up on the bow. And I was like, all right, I'll get up here. And I'm standing on the bow, and it was 360 fish coming in from all different directions, feeding. It was pretty chaotic, because you'd be watching fish
harder than a single fish.
It was, and you'd see fish. You see a school pushing in from 100, 200, even 300 yards out sometimes, and then we'd be like, oh shit, there's a school right behind us.
Yeah.
But I'm on the bow, and I see these fish. We kind of watched them for a while, and they kind of worked from behind the boat, and we're just kind of pushing away. I think they could kind of feel the boat a little bit, and we're avoiding it, and they were just kind of pushing back into the bay, and they were far out, and Aaron was like, "Go for it." And I was like, I mean, I'm a decent caster, but I don't think I've got that. I told him, I was like, I don't think I have that. He was like, just do it. And I was like, all right. Just started casting and laid it out and casted, I guess the entire fly line. And actually, when I landed, I was like, oh, I actually was right in front of him. And as I started stripping, 3 fish pulled off and were following it. And it was only a couple strips in. So when the fish ate, he was still I was pretty far out. But it was so slick that you could see the fly from that far
Wow.
out. And it was a sinking fly, and threw the crab pattern in, and he just stormed up behind it and ate it. And after about 100 reps, it was like, sometimes they do it.
Yeah.
Those
It was fun though.
great point, Colin, because you could see, Mike, because it was so slicked out, you could actually see, these fish actually eat the fly. And
Yeah.
I learned a ton because I missed multiple fish because they took it between strips, and I
Yeah.
wasn't keeping the fly as tight as I should have. And so they bump it, I'd miss it, they bump it again. And, it sucks because you want to catch those fish, but it was a great way to learn, to be able to see the whole thing and to see the mistake in that case that I was making. Quite honestly, I think your odds of catching a permit go up when the wind goes up to a certain point. I've had
100%.
easier fish, and they're never easy, but somewhat easier fish when the wind's blowing 20 than when
Yeah.
it was slicked out like it was there. But you get to see a lot more when
Yeah.
it's
Great
slicked
point.
out. And seeing the behavior, for me personally, seeing the behavior permit is like, that alone is so much fun. And so it was a great experience.
Yeah, Greg, I
Yeah.
agree. I was going to say that is like on days like that, or permit fishing in general. Most permit fishermen who get obsessed with it are totally okay with not catching fish. They've grasped it. And then I feel like it turns into just learning moments when you're permit fishing, and taking every bit in, from when you're watching your partner fish to watching slicked out conditions to seeing how, sometimes you feed a fish 10 feet away when it's cloudy and windy. But it's all learning, and it's cool to see those different scenarios and every different type, and to get that many reps in is special, and something that, you can learn a ton from.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like you guys got, in terms of the education part of it, right? Because if you condense everything through an average week of permit fishing down to your actual interactions with the fish, you're lucky throughout a week maybe to get 3 to 5 minutes, right?
Right.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That shows the ridiculousness of the pursuit. But it sounds like you guys might have gotten that in those couple of days. And there's the real bummer is when you do it for a week and you're like, I didn't even learn anything.
Didn't see one.
See anything.
I've had plenty of those.
Yeah.
I've fished.
Yeah.
I've fished a fair bit for permit, Mike, in some places. I think you've been at Abaco, Moores Island, west side of Abaco, and then the north shore of Grand Bahama. You won't see nearly as many permit. You'll see big fish. Very big fish. But you might spend 8-10 hours in the front of the boat, not even making a cast. And you sort of have to enjoy that, which sounds crazy. How could that be enjoyable? But it is, because you're playing the game at the highest level, whether or not you can execute at that level, which I can't, but I know, Mike, you can. And if Colin's making a 100-foot going away shot, he obviously can too. But, if you appreciate that to actually catch one of these fish, you have to do it at the highest level. At least for me, I don't mind that I don't get that many shots because each one's precious. But on ESB, it really was great because it almost became like any other fishery in that you were going to make, those days, Colin, we might have made, 50 casts, 100 casts at those fish. And you just never get, at least in my experience, you just never really get that. So it was really cool. Really cool.
Yeah. And I think that's what, to your point, Greg, like I have to sometimes back it down even further, right? Where it's like, look where I am. You know what I mean? Like this is a ridiculous pursuit. And if you're on a real blank job, right, where you're just
Right.
getting you to get a shot might be a miracle.
Yeah.
But it doesn't bring you to places that suck. I mean,
Yeah.
it really is pretty remarkable. And I think what both of you said, I mean, that ultimately I think is why after I saw that area the first couple times, and at that point in time was doing a lot of fishing in the Keys and Belize, and had yet to move on to other species, but was kind of like, well, if I'm going to get good at this, I need
Yeah.
the reps.
Yeah.
And then we'll always take the Keys factor, which I say, I think you get the reps in Mexico. The communication can be tough,
Right.
right? And you might not audibly get it, but in terms of audible education, like you have to fish in the Keys.
Yeah.
I mean, those are some of the best. I mean, the guys that are chasing permit in the Keys are some of the best educators, period. And I think that's why I'll forever, continue to go down there.
I had that exact conversation with Will Benson last week because Will said, well, how was it? I don't think he's been to ESB. He may have been to Ascension Bay, but, I said, well, it was great because we got all these shots. He said, and I don't think he's wrong. He said, he still thinks of the Keys as being kind of the World Series of permit fishing. I mean, they're, big fish. They're tough. They get fished too. There aren't quite as many around. So it requires maybe even a more extraordinary effort to connect on any kind of a regular basis. And I think all that's true. But as I said to him, I said, well, you're right. But how does somebody wind up here with a shot to actually catch a permit if they don't have an opportunity to get a lot of shots in somewhere else? So to me, it's like I see doing both because, you can go through a long dry spell in the Keys, whether the fish aren't there or, whatever. And then you can get reacquainted with the fun side of it by going to ESB and actually seeing fish. So I think it's all, you got to have both. I mean, at least for me, my level of this, you got to have both. And, but I cut you off. I apologize.
No, I was just going to say, you guys, like obviously got to talk to Colin a little bit, and a lot of this is in passing, so I want to explore it a little more, but you guys saw some weird behavior too, where,
yes.
And I didn't get to see enough, but was the consensus that it was spawning behavior or that they were eating, because I've seen glass shrimp down there that are so small that there's no way you're going to see what they're eating. And it's not like we don't eat, enjoy a peanut, right? So it's the same, I mean, they could easily, kick their tail when they're eating something that you couldn't see. But what was kind of the consensus? Because it's kind of really cool footage.
Well, Colin and I debated that because I've, like most people, I've, if you get into the sport, you read everything you can about behavior and tides and so on and so forth. And back in October, I was in the Keys and we were fishing the laid up permit. I was with a guy named Aaron Snell, who I think you've met.
Yeah, great guy.
And they were laid up permit, maybe a school of 50. And they just wouldn't eat. And it was right when the tide was about to turn. And when Aaron said to me, listen, we're going to give it a shot because they're here, but I don't, these fish never eat. So we gave it a shot. They didn't eat. And so the behavior in ESB seemed different to me because these fish had their tails up and occasionally you would get that tail wiggle, which I've learned is indicative that they're eating something. The ones I saw laid up during the tide, the sort of flattening of the tide in the Keys weren't wiggling their tail. They were just turning on their sides occasionally. Didn't appear to be, very active other than that. Whereas these fish, and Colin, I mean, you had, I think, a similar experience. You'd see the tails twitching. I mean, they were doing something that wasn't just acting like laid up fish.
Yeah, I mean, we saw several different types, and like some were like the guides. I guess consensus was several of the guides thought they were spawning because they said it was like a weird shake. Like some of them, I mean, some of them looked like feeding, and then some of them was like a weird like little, and like it was a lot of movement, but not a lot of movement from not a lot of acceleration from the fish. Yeah, I don't know. It was kind of weird. I kept going back and forth. It's like, yeah, they're definitely eating. And then each individual school kind of like had their own behavior too, where some of them that came in that we casted to didn't even care about the fly, and then some were pretty aggressive, but then just didn't eat.
Yeah.
It was weird. And then they joined up at one point and created a massive school that was like it had to have been like a quarter mile long of just
It was unbelievable.
for a minute, and then they kind of split back up again.
I was just going to say that would tend to, right? That if they all joined up at once, there has to be a spawning component of it, I would think.
It was right around a full moon too, but
Yeah, for sure. And as Colin said, I mean, I've seen in Ascension Bay at times, like in July, when it's, the warm months of the summer when the smaller fish are in, I've seen schools of 75 or 100. I've never seen a school that was, at one point it was, Colin said a quarter mile. It was hundreds of yards long of permit.
I've been down there for 20 years. I don't think I've ever seen that.
It was
all you
insane.
could do was laugh. It was mind blowing. Yeah.
But I'll tell you, one thing what I learned on this trip was we had very similar experience to what Colin had as far as, some of the schools had no interest in flies. But a couple of times when we were on those schools, the tide turned. And as soon as the tide turned, we had that they actually ate. So it was a really cool experience to see that. And because I always ask the guy when I get up in the front of the boat, which way is the tide coming? If I can't tell by looking at grass on the bottom, where are we in the tide cycle? Which direction is it coming from? And the couple of times when they actually were bitey, if that's the right word, is when the tide had changed. When the tide started to move, and all of a sudden they switched from kind of floating or doing whatever that weird behavior was to actually being interested in the fly.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a mind-blowing experience. Quite honestly, the trip was worth doing for 2 days of seeing that many fish on the surface, holding aside, getting shots and catching. There's such cool, wild animals doing the wild animal thing that you just don't really get to see much in life.
And what lines were you guys throwing at them? Were you everyone throwing clear tips, or were they?
I was. I don't know, Colin, were you throwing a clear tip?
Yeah, I had the SA Grand Slam clear tip. I kept going back and forth to my 9 weight and my 10 weight because I was like, I kind of want to throw the 9 to be softer. Yeah. But then a lot of these fish, I was like the fish that I caught, I had the 10 weight because I was like, I kind of need the distance just to get to them before they got closer. But at the same time, I was like, I kind of wish I had like a 7 weight.
Right.
It's just less disturbance and throwing that thing out there without all the, surface tension breaking.
When you're in a muddy place and all of a sudden you start daydreaming about, snowshoes for mud while permit fishing, or being on a tiny boat when it's that calm, so that paddleboard or and so mostly was anybody throwing a 6 or a 7? Just because that's an interesting thought process, right?
We didn't have any on the trip, I don't think.
No, I don't think so either. I think, to me, it was almost like spring creek fishing for permit.
Yeah.
Because you had to be so precise. And they, it was like being in Silver Creek when they've been feeding for 3 weeks on a hatch, and you're there and the fish are there, but they're probably not going to eat it. You have to try, but it was super technical, and it was super visual. And because you had so many shots, I always liken permit fishing to a car crash because nothing's happening, all of a sudden, boom. And this one, you could actually participate for an hour or two. It didn't feel quite like the car crash. It felt like technical spring creek fishing for permit, at least to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I was kind of kicking myself because, we had 2 eats in that, it was probably 5 hours of casting. And, which it was decent, but I was like, should have had more. And I didn't bring a bonefish box with me, but I was contemplating. I was like, should I just put a 16-foot leader with a tiny, tiny bonefish fly on it and see what happens? And I was kicking myself for not bringing, a little gotcha or something. But
it
is what it is.
That's why my fly box they're never set. You know what I mean? It's like constant, just in and out, because it's the flies you're going to catch them on, but it's those moments when you're like, I need something without weight. I need something, Do you really need 40 of the same thing? Probably, hopefully, but probably most likely not. right?
I mean, not.
Well,
Yeah.
by definition, most permit fishermen are OCD anyhow, so we tend to. I mean, I can speak for myself. When you hear about a fly working, you can't just have one; you got to have two, and they have different colors and different sizes. And before you know it, you've got a dozen of each pattern and 100 in your box, and those flies will still be unused in my box when I go to my grave, I'm sure. But it's
Yeah.
like you get induced to do that, and then to Colin's point, you finally have a chance where you can really work the fly box because these fish are there and they're just not eating what you're throwing. And then for whatever reason, you don't really work the fly box. So it's,
Well, the funny thing is like, I mean, people kept asking me that after the first day too, because I didn't change my fly the first day. I was getting interest. So I was like, it's good. The second day when that happened, I threw the fly, changed 10 times, and then went back to the same fly, and that's what the fish ate.
right.
Yeah. At some point, it's a confidence thing, right? Like you got to get back to. At some point, when you get broken down hard enough, you need to get back to something that you have actually seen work, and that's what's amazing, that it can break you down. And you guys got pounded with rain for the rest of some of it.
Yeah, we did. I think, Colin, we had like 3 days. The first 3 days, first 2 days were stellar. The arrival day, the next day, unbelievable. I think we had a few clouds. By the third day,
I think was mostly wind and clouds.
Yeah.
And then fourth day was the down day, I believe.
It was
Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah.
And then a lot of rain and wind and clouds, and yeah.
We had about a 4-hour on the second last day. We had about a 4-hour period where the sun came out, and that was the day I got my permit. It's just because the schools were where we found the first day, Colin, but they hadn't been fished to in 2 days because the weather had been crappy. And luckily we had that little window. And then I think on the last day it must have rained 3 inches when we were out there.
Yeah.
I mean, it was pretty extreme, but you still say to yourself, I'd take 6 days of rain for 1 day of unbelievable fishing. And we had 2 days of unbelievable fishing, and we had 3 days of rain. So it was all,
And I mean, even throughout the week, even with the bad weather, it seemed like there was a lot of eats. There was some broken off fish. There was some missed fish.
Yeah.
Which that's just fishing. But the opportunity was there, and also heard of a lot of dry fly eats. I mean, which is pretty special too.
Yeah.
Even in some of the rain, it sounded like people had some dry fly eats.
Yeah. Yeah, which is really, I mean, you can't, like I said before, I thought this was kind of an old wives' tale about permitting crabs on top, and then I saw it happening. It's like I can't believe it. I mean, comes up above the water, sticks the eyes out. It's insane. And I've asked about that, and the guys in the Keys told me that they used to get permit eating on top, and maybe they were fished too hard, whatever. That's sort of gone away. I think some guys in the Bahamas told me they've occasionally seen it. But my sense is that ESB, maybe it's also in Ascension Bay, has more of that activity than other places. And maybe, Mike, to your earlier point, it's with the Sargasso piling in there. It's just learned behavior.
Is it also because in other places that no one is willing to commit to it, right? So, I mean, I remember in the Keys a while, call it, definitely more than 10 years ago, had some friends committing to floating crabs, and we're catching a couple, but it was short-lived. And I think this latest craze of it, there's a lot of people doing it, and they're doing it a lot, right? So it's not like you have this one boat out there giving it a shot. It's like, it's gaining traction. And even then, to your point, Greg, you go into it thinking this is kind of bullshit, and then you see it and you're like, oh, wow, maybe and then all of a sudden, when I was down there, 6 months ago, I would, of all of the fish caught, I'd say there was a lot. I'd say 80% were on the surface. And that's insane.
That's incredible. I mean, I've read about, and Mike, have you fished Australia for permit?
Yes.
So I thought I read an article that there was a crab hatch, if you want to call it that, in Australia where they were using floating crabs with some frequency. Did you have that experience out there or no?
We didn't get there. We weren't on all of my trips over there. So I fished Exmouth, the Wessels, and Cape York. I would say never really were seeing enough
Yeah.
to, it was like, let's go with the known thing. I mean, I guess that goes to our prior, right, brief conversation there, is that you almost need to be in a certain spot unless the guide's like pushing you on it. Where like mentally,
Right.
where you're like, all right, I've caught a couple. Now let's see if we can get them up top. But
Yeah.
I've heard of it over there.
You're making me laugh because I tie my own crabs, which I'm not sure any permanent right mine would come within 100 feet of. They don't look particularly good, but I always bring them because I always say to myself, as soon as I catch one or two using a good fly, I'm going to switch to my fly to see if it works.
Yeah.
And I never get to that point. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, you get stuck in these patterns. Like now that we're having this conversation, I think with hindsight, I mentioned that I'd seen these laid up permit in the Keys with Aaron Snell. With hindsight, I should have thrown a floating crab at them. Why not? They weren't eating any of the traditional stuff. What's the downside?
Yeah.
But, I just didn't think fast.
Might trigger something in the back of their brain.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've had success in the Keys doing that with Wilt, where he's like, use this. It was a tarpon fly that was so, it's amazing the confidence fly. I mean, we could talk about that for hours, but one of the things I definitely want to touch on is, and unfortunately it was you guys were there, but for the bad weather week, but I just take a lot of it makes me smile when there's a tough weather week, when the group kind of gets along and no one's down on it because it is completely out of your control. And I don't know, I would like to just hear a little bit of that, because that's, to me, that's just as special as as the fish in hand. I mean, it's really cool, and I'm glad that went down. I mean, that was right. What you don't want is the get me out of here right away scenario, right?
Yeah.
And that's worst case.
I think, I mean, as I mentioned at the outset, we were really lucky because everybody got along great on this trip. There were two brothers down from, one lives in Bozeman and the other lives in Connecticut. And I came back and hooked them up with Aaron Snell in the Keys because they want to go down the Keys and fish. They hadn't done it in years. So there's a lot of camaraderie. And I think, when the weather was bad, there was only one day when we couldn't go out. But I mean, that day the wind was probably blowing 35 or something, right, Colin? I mean, it was insane. But, we played darts and we watched everybody tie flies and we made good work of the margaritas. And it was awesome. I mean, it's like you said, Mike, you don't go down hoping to miss a day. But that was about as easy a missed day as you could have. I mean, it was really fun. And you do have to sort of, I mean, for me personally, I've done enough of these trips. I always expect you're going to lose a day or two. It's just the way it always is, and you just get used to it.
Well, and it's what we're trying to do, right? I mean, it's just, I think it says it on our website. We're not trying to do it all. And it's just, it's fulfilling. It's like doing this. It's being able to sit down with you guys. I mean, we could, we're already an hour plus into this. I could do this for hours. It's fulfilling to know that people, right? If you take the time and match up, hopefully what is, and won't always be, but are the right people, that those relationships extend beyond the actual trip. And it's, I don't know, they're special times. So it's nice to make them even more special.
I couldn't agree more. I think it's like, we could sort of tell the night before we took off for the dinner. I mean, everybody's going to get along, and it worked out. It worked out great. And the other thing I would say that was kind of fun on that down day is Jorge was with us, and he'd come in. He was out for a few days, came back in. I think maybe the first day he came in, Colin was on that bad weather day, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And we got to hang with him and learn a little bit about, how he put the lodge together, the whole process of building it. Just a really cool, good guy. And, we got 6 hours with him in that upstairs lounge playing darts, time flies. We never would have had that.
Yeah.
And you learn a ton from that too. I mean, I had a chance to ask a bunch of questions, and it was great.
Yeah. He's a real legend. I do remember when, the walls were up and the lodge wasn't done yet, but I said, Jorge, you're gonna hate me for this, and then you're gonna thank me for this. But I'm bringing an actual group in August, and the only thing that I told them that would happen is air conditioning. But when I got there, he had what looked like it was like a stress ball had grown out of his nose. I mean, and I'm not joking. Like, he physically had changed. And I was like, oh man, you're not guiding. So I think it's just amazing when I first met him to now. It's really impressive. And
Yeah, I was going to say one comment on the infrastructure was that it was the nicest room other than Blackfly Lodge, which I think you've probably been to,
yeah,
Mike, in Abaco.
Yeah.
Special place, special people, special place. But other than Blackfly, the accommodations in Blacksmith were incredible. I mean, the AC was awesome. The rooms were pristine. Of course, the food is also 5 stars. So it's like not really hard to have a weathered out day, and you can sit in strong AC or have unbelievable food and great margaritas. So it seemed, what I said to Jorge when I was down there was like every single aspect of that experience was awesome. And it shows that somebody thought a lot about all the details. And you don't appreciate that fully until you're stuck inside for a day.
Yeah, and I think it's because the thought process is solely from anglers, right? I mean, and people that have done it a lot. So I mean, when you do it a lot, you get your pain points, and yeah, I mean it's a special spot. Well, I've taken up, we could do this for hours, and I know I've taken up a bunch of your time. But one thing I like to ask everyone: any good books that you guys have been reading that because I'm always trying to add to the list.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think. Of course, as soon as you ask me, I'm like, God, what were the last books I just read? Yeah. But I'm 3/4 way through 1929, which I would not read if I were you. It's not okay. It's that's good. Given the current market conditions and the concern over AI and geopolitics, maybe you wait until we're in a little bit more stable period of time to read that. And then I'm reading a book called Nexus, which is by, I'm going to butcher his name, is an Israeli writer who wrote Homo Sapien, if you read that.
Oh,
book. Yeah. So he's got 3 books. This is the third. And it's all about communication networks. And it's actually, that sounds very dry, but it's actually really interesting.
I don't think I've read Homo Sapiens, but I have it.
I will tell you, I loved it because Homo Sapiens was filled with information in lots of different areas. If you've ever read, who's the guy who's, The Founding Fish, McPhee. Have you ever read anything by John McPhee?
I have a John McPhee book sitting on my desk right now.
There you go. Ocean and Range, or what's the title there?
Rising from the Plains.
Rising from the Plains. So John McPhee is a great writer who goes very into incredible detail on little topics that wind up being big once he covers them. So he wrote a book which was pertinent to me and also would be to you, Mike, in a sense. He wrote a book called The Founding Fish, which is about the shad fishery in the Delaware River. Shad fishery in general, but Delaware River. So the reason I mentioned McPhee is he goes deep on topics and you really learn a ton. And this guy, Noval Harari, or however you pronounce his name, the guy who wrote Sapiens, same experience. You learn a ton when you read it, but that might mean you read 10 pages and you got to sort of put it down and say, okay, let me absorb what I just read. But anyhow, it's a pretty cool book. But Colin, obviously, you're reading that McPhee book now?
I just started. I don't know enough about it yet. But one of Mike's buddies who I guided this summer actually gave it to me. It's about the geology in the Rocky
Yeah,
Mountains and
yeah,
whatnot.
yeah.
Yeah.
He's got another one called, I think it's called Basin and Range,
Hmm.
which is another one about the geology of the West with John McPhee. But he's a great writer. The other guy I would recommend, actually, it's books. These 2 books came out a while ago. Have you ever heard of Charles Mann?
Yeah.
think so.
Why have I heard of?
He wrote an unbelievable book, 1491, which was a book about South America and Central America and all through the Yucatan before the Spaniards came over. So it was the world that existed.
They talk about how there was actually a thriving culture in
Yep.
South Central America before we even thought existed.
Exactly. Something like 100 million, population about 100 million is what I've read.
Yeah.
And they were very sophisticated, and they got wiped out long before the Europeans showed up because Russian fur traders on the West Coast and Portuguese cod fishermen on the East Coast both introduced diseases that Native Americans had no prior exposure to. And it sort of wiped out. It worked its way down the coast. And from what I've read, it wiped out something like 90% of the population of Native Americans, certainly in North America, and probably had a lesser impact in Central America. But yeah, that's exactly the book where he talks about how sophisticated that culture was.
Yeah.
And then 1493 is his follow-on, which talks about how the world has changed since all that happened. So, and I love books like that because they really get you into, you really learn a ton. Science, politics, economics, the whole idea.
Well, I don't know how it got by me, but I'm reading Doug Peacock's Grizzly Years book.
What's the book?
I don't know how it got by me. I'd put it out there for anyone. He's living with the Grizzlies like a special force member would,
Right.
who was operated in Vietnam, but the Grizzlies basically saved him. So he kind of devoted, but these interactions are just, it's remarkable.
I'll have to get that because I have to get that because I can't read 1929 anymore. It's going to freak me out. So I'll have to read the book you're
Well,
recommending.
I have to say just operating out here, like I've learned so much from just reading his stories about how you would actually, like when you get into a bad encounter, how you should, like the false information out there compared to a dude who's lived with him and has probably been charged 100 times and is still around to talk about it. Like it's pretty wild, but
I was going to say, there's one book you might want to read called Tiger.
Oh,
it's a book called Tiger. I think that's its title. It's about okay, so you read that. Okay, good.
Special. Good. Well, excellent. Well, can't thank you guys enough, and look forward to seeing you when we can, and appreciate your time today. It was, like I said, we could have gone on for hours. So what an amazing time, and hearing your stories on the trip. So appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Happy to be there. It was a good time.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.